Hi everybody, Chris Bradford along with Cody Tucker here at Highmark Stadium, here for Morning Java, a very special edition of Morning Java. We're going to be talking a little hockey today, even though it is August. But speaking of August, Get-Go Cafe and Market breakfast combo deal, $3.99, includes breakfast sandwich, hash brown, and a small coffee, only for $3.99.
Yeah, I've already blown my whole first paycheck at Get-Go, so, and they, especially on those 2 for $5 breakfast bagel sandwiches, I have had plenty of those.
Yeah, we're looking good. I've been there too myself. Well, we are talking hockey today, and I think one of the bigger discussions that's always going on in Pittsburgh in particular is who is the best player in the game. I know in Pittsburgh they like to feel that they've had the best player, continuously since about 1984, since they drafted Mario Lemieux. Yeah. Obviously, they've had Jaromir Jagr come through, and then Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. And it's been fairly continuous. I'm not going to say, all 35 years that they've had the best player, but a pretty good run. Which brings us to 2018-19 season. There's some talk of who is the best player in the game. Is it still Sidney Crosby?
Yes, I think so. I don't see who else out there is more dynamic, brings the winning touch, the winning culture, plays that full 200-foot game like he does, and leads the way he does. I just, obviously you can say Alex Ovechkin, now he's got that monkey off his back, so it's going to be interesting to see how he comes out this year, too, now that he does have that monkey off his back.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I do still believe it is Sidney Crosby. He is just 31 years old, which, it's 31 isn't 31 what it was, 20 right. years ago when Mario Lemieux turned 31 and was looking at retirement. Crosby's a finely conditioned athlete. He still plays, as you mentioned, the 200-foot game. To me, that's what separates Crosby. That's what makes him the best player in the game. Yeah. Probably the best superstar of all time who's played that true 200-foot game. I think this year, though, might be the year where Connor McDavid might surpass him as being, clearly the most electric player in the game. He's a guy who brings, obviously, a lot of speed. He plays a high-skill game. Not quite the 200-foot player, though.
Well, and will McDavid, I guess, make the players around him better the way Crosby does? I think that's been yet to be seen. He is dynamic. He's a great player, but does he bring that extra added incentive like Crosby does?
And when you mentioned Crosby, you mentioned the winning, and that's the one thing that Connor McDavid definitely has not done. He made the playoffs 2 years ago. Oilers missed the playoffs last year. That's kind of a mark against him. So we'll see what happens with McDavid and the Oilers and what happens with this debate as to who's the best player in the game. When the Penguins return to training camp in early September up in Cranberry, they're going to return pretty much the same team that lost in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs to the Washington Capitals. Not a lot of roster spots available, but there are a few question marks. There's a few, we'll say, what-ifs with the Penguins roster. Who in particular, to you, stands out as a who-if?
There's a gigantic what-if in Daniel Sprong, who obviously is here. He's here. He's not going anywhere. There's no way that he's going to make it through wires. So it's sink or swim time for Sprong, who could score 30 goals or could be in the press box with us a majority of the time. And it's time. It's time. And the guy's dynamic. He's got to get that 200-foot game down. And, if Crosby and Malkin and those guys and Kessel are back there back checking, you better be too. And you better know where you need to be on the ice.
Yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot of pressure on Daniel Sprong this season. I talked to Clark Donatelli, he's coach in Wilkes-Barre last season, and he mentioned that he felt that Sprong could be potentially a 40-goal scorer, possibly be a guy who's going to lead the league in scoring. Well, that's probably not going to happen in year one. Maybe a few years down the road. No pressure. But it's not going to happen in year one. Maybe, down the line that could happen. But as you mentioned, there's some gaps in his game, particularly on the defensive side. That's kept him down really in Wilkes-Barre to this point. But also some of the things in the offensive zone.
Well, what's the best way for you to score 30, 40 points or 30, 40 goals when you play for the Penguins is to play with Sid or to play with Gino. And if he doesn't know where he's going in the zone and he's not where they need him to be and he's not working hard to get open, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to me to see where they actually spot him. Is he going to play on the top line with Gensel and Crosby? Mm-hmm. And Sprong, that would be a highly I'm all for it, by the way. I would like to see a highly entertaining, all high octane, all offensive line like that. Yeah. But chances are he could be down on the third line.
He could, or even the fourth, or not in the lineup at all. I mean, that's kind of where he's at right now.
I don't see him, being a question mark in the lineup. Jim Rutherford said, he's going to be in the lineup. He's going to be a regular. I suspect that'll be the case, but I think we got to kind of temper our expectations. When I think of a what if with the Penguins next season, I'm thinking more of Zach Aston Reese. He's a guy who played a handful of games last year. He acquitted himself quite well. Mm-hmm. But he's another guy, because of some of these guys they've brought in, like guys like a Matt Cullen and a Derek Grant, some of these centers are going to have to probably move to left wing. Yep. Well, that could affect Zach Aston Reese.
Well, and Zach's another guy. He's another wild card. He's tough. He is that guy Sullivan wants because he does everything right. and he's got a huge body, and he's not afraid to go to the dirty areas. And if you're going to do that, goals are going to come, and you're not going to lose ice time. So it'll be interesting to see what line he's with as well.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of Aston Reese. I like, he brings youth. That's something that the Penguins do not have a lot of. This is a team that's getting a little bit long in the tooth. He does have some speed that can obviously works well with Mike Sullivan's system, and he brings an element of toughness that the Penguins haven't had.
I'm excited to see him and Tom Wilson across from each other on opening night.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that first game against the Capitals, there might be at least one fight.
I hope so.
Well, the offseason is always the NHL's silly time, and of course there's been a lot of moves through free agency. Some teams have really bolstered their cases to win the Stanley Cup in 2019. For my money, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they went out and they got the biggest fish in the pond in free agency. They get John Tavares. They've already got Austin Matthews. They're an up-and-coming team. It remains to be seen if Tavares is that missing link that puts Toronto over the top. But I think you have to say they've really improved their stock.
They did, and that's, you kind of stole my answer there. Aside from losing Van Riemsdyk to the Flyers, they look to be set, and they're very young. Another team that made a lot of moves are the St. Louis Blues. They were very active. And as far as the teams that didn't, however, I would almost have to go with our very own Pittsburgh Penguins. Yeah, Jack Johnson, Matt Cullen, Derek Grant, didn't do a lot.
I can see what you're saying, and I think that's been kind of the response we've got from a lot of the fan base. When the Penguins got, particularly Jack Johnson, a lot of people not crazy about the move. I'm actually okay with that move. I thought the Matt Cullen move was a little more questionable. I thought if they let him go once, you let him go a second time. When I think of maybe teams that might take a step back, I'm looking at the New Jersey Devils. Taylor Hall had the season of his career. I'm not sure that the Devils, for all the good that they did last season, are going to be the same team that we saw last year get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of those teams kind of stayed stagnant, lost some guys. The other one I think that maybe did the most with doing the least is the defending Stanley Cup champions. Yeah. Aside from a head coaching change, they're intact.
Yeah, but they get rid of Brooks Orpik, bring him right back at $6 million or $4 million less money. That's a pretty shrewd move by the Washington Capitals.
Pretty slick, and now they know how to win.
And and there's another team I want to throw out there, a good team that I think that's going to make some waves. The Buffalo Sabres. I think that's a team. They've been downtrodden. They've been actually the dregs of the NHL the last few years. But they get Rasmus Dahlin, the #1 overall pick. They got Casey Middlestat, a top pick from a year ago. That to me looks like a team that's going to be a lot more difficult to play in 2019.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carter Hutton, he's going to be the big one in Buffalo. The goaltending has been the defense has been hideous. Don't get me wrong, but the goaltending subpar at best. Carter Hutton was the best in the NHL last year, save percentage wise. We'll see. He had a sample size, of course, and he's older.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Carter Hutton fan, but I like what they're doing offensively, and I think the defense with Dahlin is going to be a little bit better. So that's why I'm throwing the Sabres in that mix. But
and maybe got rid of some cancers, maybe some Ryan O'Reilly and some Vander Kane, and get young and build under Jack Eichel is, I think, what their plan is.
All right, Cody, as we mentioned earlier, the Penguins are a team that's, I don't want to say getting a little long in the tooth, but this is a veteran-laden team. It's a team that's won 2 Stanley Cups. Is the window still open on the Penguins?
Yes, it is, because of guys like Crosby and Malkin. But the scary part is when you start looking down the road a little bit, they've given up a ton of #1 draft picks. And I've heard from a lot of fans that they're very concerned about what's going on down at the AHL level, and you would be able to speak more to that. But, the window is open, and they're making those moves to make sure that they're getting that help mid-season. But when will that come back to bite you?
Yeah, clearly Jim Rutherford is playing for the here and now. And what happens later down the road, well, the worst case scenario is that you end up with the #1 overall pick. And if you've followed anything about the Penguins over the last 30 years, you know that they've really only had success when they've had the #1 overall pick, be it Mario Lemieux in 1984 or Sidney Crosby in 2005. Those guys only came about because the Penguins had to hit the bottom, and really there's no worse place to be in hockey is purgatory, which I like to call is being that 8th and 9th spot in a conference where you're just on the bubble of the playoffs. Either you want to be winning the Stanley Cup or you want to be vying for that #1 overall pick.
Right, and would Daniel Sprong have that much attention on him this year? I mean, he's a second-round draft pick, but essentially he's a first-round draft pick. Same with Zach Aston Reese. They're essentially the first-rounders that weren't first-rounders.
Same with Kalen Addison. We'll see him down the road. He's going to have a lot of pressure. And same with Philip Hollander, another second-round pick who's a de facto first-round pick for the Penguins. But when this bubble bursts, and it's going to burst sooner or later, and it's just a matter of when, I still think the Penguins are going to be a contender this year and probably the season after that. But once Crosby starts to get maybe 34, 35, And then we talked about who's the best player in the game. At that point, it's not going to be any question. It's
Yeah.
not going to be Sidney Crosby at 34, 35. As great as he is, realistically, the Penguins are going to probably hit hard times.
They need to get young, and unfortunately, I could see something happening where they age right before your very eyes, and then that's when they have to start dumping people at the deadline, and that's how they're going to get younger, and they're going to have to start taking those number one picks.
Yeah, and we mentioned Jack Johnson earlier. There's another guy. He's 31 years old, but he's signed for 5 years. How's that going to play out at the end of that contract? Same with Patrick Hornquist, a guy who plays a physical game. He's had some injury history. What's going to happen to him in those final 2 years?
Yeah, they could be nice trade chips. Unfortunately, or fortunately for Penguins fans, I don't think that's going to happen this year.
No, not this year.
Or next year or the year after that. In my opinion, it's going to be a while.